There's this idea that's been baked into the country since the beginning. Work hard, play by the rules, and you can make it. Doesn't matter where you came from, what your parents did, what language you speak at home. America is the place where anyone can succeed if they want it badly enough. That's the dream, anyway. The promise that's been sold to millions of people for generations. And the strange thing is, it's both true and complete bullshit at the same time. Because for every person who actually lives that dream, there are thousands who work just as hard and get nowhere. But the ones who make it, their stories are what keep the dream alive. Take Andrew Carnegie. He showed up in America from Scotland in 1848, 13 years old, dirt poor. His family had been weavers back home, but industrialization had killed that industry, left them with nothing. So they scraped together enough money to sail to Pennsylvania, where they had relatives who might help. Carnegie's first job was in a factory, working 12-hour days for $1.20 a week. He was a kid, and the work was brutal, but he showed up every day because that's what you did. He taught himself to read better, studied at night, made himself useful. Got a job as a telegraph messenger, then learned telegraphy itself. Worked his way up to telegraph operator, then got noticed by a guy who worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad. That guy, Thomas Scott, took Carnegie under his wing, taught him the railroad business, gave him opportunities. And Carnegie didn't waste them. He learned everything he could, made smart investments, saved his money, and paid attention to where industries were headed. By his 30s, Carnegie had shifted into steel. He saw that railroads needed steel, that cities would need steel, that the country was about to explode with growth, and steel would be the foundation of all of it. He built mills, modernized production, undercut competitors, and became ruthlessly efficient. He wasn't nice about it either. He paid workers poorly, fought unions, pushed people to their limits, but he built an empire. By the time he sold his steel company to J.P. Morgan in 1901, he walked away with nearly $500 million. In today's money, that's something like $15 billion. The story gets complicated, though, because Carnegie spent the second half of his life giving that money away. He built libraries across the country, funded universities, created foundations. He wrote essays about how the rich had a moral obligation to distribute their wealth for the public good. Whether that absolves him for how he made the money in the first place is debatable, but his story is pure American dream mythology. Immigrant kid arrives with nothing, works his way up, becomes one of the richest men in the world. Or look at someone more recent. Do-Won Chang arrived in Los Angeles from South Korea in 1981. He was in his mid-20s, had been a teacher back home, came to America thinking opportunity would be everywhere. It wasn't. He pumped gas, worked as a janitor, did whatever jobs he could find. His wife Jin Suk worked as a hairdresser. They saved everything they could, lived cheap, and tried to figure out how to break through. In 1984, they noticed something. The fashionable clothes in expensive stores were being bought by people who had money, but there were tons of young people who wanted that look and couldn't afford it. So they opened a small clothing store in Los Angeles called Fashion 21, selling trendy clothes at prices regular people could actually pay. The store worked. They opened another, then another, changed the name to Forever 21, and the business exploded. Forever 21 became massive, thousands of stores worldwide, billions in revenue. Do-Won and Jin Suk became billionaires themselves. They lived the absolute textbook version of the American dream. Came from another country, worked terrible jobs, identified an opportunity, took a risk, built something huge. For years, they were the example people pointed to when they wanted to prove the dream was real. Then, the cracks showed. Forever 21 declared bankruptcy in 2019. Fast fashion became controversial, labor practices got scrutinized, the business model that had worked so well started falling apart. The Changs lost their billionaire status, had to close hundreds of stores. The dream didn't die exactly, but it got a lot more complicated. Success isn't permanent. The system that lets you rise can also destroy you, but here's someone whose story is different. Ursula Burns grew up in a housing project on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in the 1960s. Her mother was an immigrant from Panama who took in ironing to make money, sometimes worked 3 jobs at once to keep the family afloat. Burns has talked about how her mother was ferocious about education, how she made it clear that school was non-negotiable, that it was the only way out. Burns was good at math, got into a program that helped minority students prepare for college, ended up at Brooklyn Polytechnic studying mechanical engineering. She did an internship at Xerox in 1980 and got hired full-time after graduation. She was one of the few Black women in engineering at the company, and she stood out, not just because of demographics, but because she was sharp, willing to speak up, didn't apologize for taking up space. She moved up through Xerox over decades, from engineer to executive assistant to vice president to president. In 2009, she became CEO. She was the first Black woman to run a Fortune 500 company. Think about that for a second. In the entire history of American corporate power, she was the first. That's incredible and also kind of damning about how long it took. Burns ran Xerox for 7 years, navigated the company through brutal transitions as the industry shifted digital. She made tough calls, laid people off, restructured entire divisions. Some decisions worked, some didn't. She stepped down in 2016, but her story remains this powerful example of someone who came from nothing and got to the absolute top through competence and determination. The American dream in its purest form, except it also highlights how rare that journey is, especially for women, especially for Black women. Then there are the stories that don't fit the clean narrative. People who worked just as hard but didn't break through, or who made it and then lost everything, or who succeeded in ways that weren't about money at all. The dream is supposed to be about upward mobility, about prosperity, but what does that actually mean? Take someone like Chris Gardner. His story got turned into a movie, The Pursuit of Happiness, with Will Smith. Gardner grew up in Milwaukee, rough childhood, stepfather who was abusive, moved around a lot. He joined the Navy, got out, tried to make it as a medical equipment salesman. Got married, had a kid, and then everything fell apart. His wife left, took their son initially, and Gardner ended up homeless. He was trying to break into stockbroking, doing an unpaid internship at a firm while literally sleeping in subway bathrooms and shelters with his young son. The internship didn't pay anything, and he had no money, no safety net. He'd show up to the office in the only suit he owned, trying to look professional while dealing with the fact that he didn't know where he'd sleep that night. Most people in that situation would have given up, would have taken any paying job just to survive. Gardner didn't. He finished the internship, got hired, and eventually started his own brokerage firm. Became a millionaire, wrote a book, became a motivational speaker. His story is incredible, genuinely inspiring, but it's also kind of terrifying when you think about it. Because the subtext is that the American dream requires that level of suffering, that you have to be willing to risk everything, including your child's stability, to have a shot. And even then, most people in Gardner's situation don't make it. He did, and that's amazing, but survivorship bias is real. Or consider the stories of people who immigrated more recently, who are living the dream right now in real time. There's a guy named Hamdi Ulukaya who came to the United States from Turkey in 1994 to study English. He was in his early 20s, from a family of shepherds and cheesemakers, didn't have much money. He ended up in upstate New York, noticed that the yogurt in America was terrible compared to what he'd grown up eating. In 2005, he bought a closed craft yogurt plant with a small business administration loan, started making Greek yogurt under the brand Chobani, and it turned out Americans were ready for better yogurt. Chobani exploded, became the best-selling Greek yogurt in the country within a few years. Ulukaya became a billionaire, but he also did something unusual. He gave his employees shares in the company, made some of them millionaires when the company hit certain valuations. He's been outspoken about refugees, about giving people opportunities, about businesses having responsibilities beyond profit. His story is the dream working exactly as advertised. Immigrant arrives, sees a gap in the market, works incredibly hard, builds something valuable, succeeds beyond imagination. And he's trying to use that success to help others, to pay it forward. It's the kind of story that makes you believe the whole thing is possible. But then you have to reckon with all the people who tried and failed. The businesses that closed, the dreams that didn't pan out, the hard work that went unrewarded. For every Chobani, there are thousands of food companies that never got off the ground. For every Carnegie, There are millions of factory workers who stayed factory workers their whole lives. The dream works for some people, but it's not a guarantee. It's not even a particularly good bet. There's also the question of what the dream costs. Arnold Schwarzenegger came to America from Austria in 1968 with a gym bag and a dream of becoming the greatest bodybuilder in the world. He achieved that, won Mr. Olympia 7 times. Then he transitioned into acting despite being told his accent was too thick, his body too big, his name unpronounceable. He became one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. Then he went into politics, became governor of California, married into the Kennedy family, became an icon of success. And then his personal life imploded. His marriage fell apart after it came out he'd fathered a child with the family's housekeeper. His political career ended with mixed reviews. The dream delivered fame and wealth, but it didn't deliver happiness or stability or integrity. Schwarzenegger has been pretty open about his mistakes, about how success in one area doesn't mean success in all areas. The dream is incomplete that way. It promises prosperity but not fulfillment. Then you have people like Damon John, who grew up in Queens, raised by a single mother who worked multiple jobs. He started selling hats on the street in the early 1990s, making them in his mother's house. The brand was FUBU, for us by us, targeted at the hip-hop community. He and his partners hustled, got LL Cool J to wear FUBU in a music video, and the brand took off. John went from selling hats on the corner to running a company that did hundreds of millions in revenue. Now he's an investor, one of the sharks on Shark Tank, helping other entrepreneurs chase their own version of the dream. His story is about community, about identifying an underserved market, about staying authentic. But it's also about timing, about being in the right place when hip-hop was becoming mainstream culture. Would FUBU have worked 10 years earlier or later? Hard to say. The dream often requires luck as much as effort. What's interesting is how the definition of the American dream has shifted over time. Used to be about stability. A house, a car, a job that paid enough to support a family. Security. Now it's more about wealth, about becoming rich, about startups and exits, and becoming a millionaire before 30. The goalposts moved, and for a lot of people, that's made the dream feel more distant. Someone like Madam C.J. Walker understood a different version of the dream. She was born Sarah Breedlove in 1867 on a Louisiana plantation, first person in her family born free after the Civil War. Both parents died when she was young. She was orphaned by 7, married at 14 to escape an abusive brother-in-law, widowed at 20 with a young daughter to support. She worked as a washerwoman, made barely enough to survive. She started losing her hair, probably due to stress and poor diet and the harsh products she was using. She experimented with homemade remedies, created a formula that worked, and started selling it to other Black women. Built a whole line of hair care products, trained sales agents, created a business model that employed thousands of Black women across the country. By the time she died in 1919, she was the wealthiest self-made woman in America. Her story is particularly powerful because of the obstacles. Black, female, born into poverty right after slavery, orphaned young. The deck was stacked against her in every possible way, and she still built an empire. That's the dream at its most inspiring, proof that it's possible even when everything says it shouldn't be. But we have to be honest about survivorship bias. For every Walker, how many Black women worked themselves to death and died in poverty? How many tried to start businesses and failed because they couldn't get loans or faced discrimination or just ran into bad luck? Success stories are the exceptions, not the rule, and treating them as proof that anyone can make, it ignores the structural barriers that keep most people from breaking through. Look at someone like Jay-Z, grew up in the projects in Brooklyn, dealt drugs as a teenager, watched friends die or go to prison. Got into rap, couldn't get a record deal, so he started his own label, Rockefeller Records, with friends. Put out his own album, Reasonable Doubt, which became a classic. Built that into a business empire that includes music. It's real enough that examples exist, people who actually lived it, who came from nothing and built something significant. But it's also a myth that gets used to justify inequality, to suggest that anyone who's poor just isn't working hard enough. Both things coexist. The dream is possible and it's propaganda. It's inspiring and it's a lie. Someone like Elon Musk complicates it further. He's held up as this genius entrepreneur who revolutionized multiple industries: electric cars, space travel, online payments. But he also came from wealth, had family money from an emerald mine in South Africa, had advantages most people don't. His version of the American dream involved immigration and building companies, but it started from a very different place than Carnegie or Gardner or Walker. The truth is there are different American dreams depending on where you start. If you're born wealthy, the dream is about legacy, about building something even bigger. If you're born middle class, it's about security and maybe upward mobility. If you're born poor, it's about survival first and maybe, if you're lucky and talented and work yourself half to death, breaking through. They're not the same dream at all. And then there's the cost. The people who achieve the dream often sacrifice everything else. Relationships, health, peace of mind. They work 100-hour weeks, miss their kids growing up, burn out, break down. Is it worth it? Some say yes, absolutely. Others look back with regret, wonder if they could have found a different balance. The dream also changes what it promises. Used to be about having enough, about a decent life. Now it's about excess, about becoming famous or wealthy or powerful. Social media has made it worse, turned everyone's success into a performance, made the dream feel both more accessible and more distant. You can watch people get rich on YouTube or TikTok and think, I could do that. But for every person who makes it that way, there are millions who don't. What's true is that America has created more opportunity for more people than most places in history. The mobility is real, the possibility exists. People do rise from poverty, do build businesses, do create new lives. But it's harder than the mythology suggests, more dependent on luck and timing and circumstances beyond individual control. Hard work matters, but it's not enough by itself. Never has been. The real stories of the American dream are messy, complicated, full of sacrifice and luck and timing. They're inspiring and cautionary at the same time. They show what's possible and what it costs. And they remind us that for every success story we celebrate, there are countless others who worked just as hard and didn't make it, who believed in the dream and got crushed by reality. Maybe that's the honest version of the American dream. Not that anyone can make it, but that some people do, against odds, through combination of effort and opportunity and fortune. And that their stories matter not because they prove the system works,